and welcome to today's webinar, GenAI in the Workplace, Upskilling Teams for Exponential Impact. My name's Etty, I'm the Senior Content Marketing Executive here at ILX. We'll just give it another minute or so for a few more people to join. I think people are still sort of filtering in, and then I'll be handing over to Bassel and Andrew here, who are going to take you through the main portion of our presentation today. So while we're just waiting for those last few people to join, I've got a couple of housekeeping bits that I just want to run through. If we could just do that quickly. So first you'll notice that you're all on mute. Please do remain on mute throughout the session. I don't think you have an option to not be on mute, but if you do, please don't click that. Keep yourself quiet so that we can make sure everyone can hear the presentation well. If you do have any questions though, up in the top right-hand corner of your screen, there should be a little question box. Pop the questions in there, and then we're doing a Q&A session at the end, so we'll answer any questions then. If they're technical questions, you can't see properly, you can't hear properly, I'll be dealing with those in the background, so I'll try and get those resolved while we're going through the presentation. The webinar is being recorded. You'll receive a follow-up email from us tomorrow with a link so that you can watch that back or share it with colleagues, etc. And then we also like to say, just give us a follow over on social media. Our ILX channels are active on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. And you can also follow Simply Learn over on those channels as well. Today's session is going to be about 30 to 40 minutes. And then, as I said, we'll leave plenty of time at the end so that we can answer a few questions. So yeah, without further ado, I shall hand you over to the guys here who are going to take you through today's presentation.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Etty. Welcome everybody. Thank you very much for attending. My name is Andrew Wallace. I'm an account director for the ILX group. I've been with the business approximately 8 to 9 years. And my role within ILX is really to sell, but also to implement training solutions to our corporate clients. Now, as you would expect, a lot of that is working with ILX in-house content, but increasingly I'm working with the guys at Simply Learn. Simply Learn are our main, in fact, totally main tech partner for technical delivery. And later on, what I'm going to do is just introduce you to the range of solutions that Simply Learn offer, with the hope of obviously making you fully aware of what they are, but also giving you some interest in trying to find out a little bit more about how Simply Learn can help you. The range of solutions is top quality, wide and varied, and therefore we're not going to go into too much detail on that today. But if you're interested, obviously please reach out to your account managers, who will be desperate to give you some more information. So I'll be covering the learning and development element of it later on. At this stage, I'd like to introduce Bassel. Bassel is an instructor for Simply Learn. He does a lot of machine learning and data science content, but I want to stress at this stage that what you'll find with a lot of Simply Learn instructors is that he's not only an instructor, he's a practitioner. He's got senior positions like very many of the Simply Learn instructors, which really makes their course content stand out. These aren't book learned guys. These are guys that are at the coalface, working with the technologies day in, day out, and we really make that, we feel that really makes a difference for the Simply Learn training solution. So without further ado, over to you, Bassel.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate the kind words. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here and excited to share the information that I have here for you in this webinar. Just to recap my background, I basically lead multiple teams in data analytics, data engineering, and machine learning. And also our sole purpose is to serve our end users and provide them with insightful analytics, whether it's in the form of a dashboard or it's in the form of a machine learning or AI solution. And then along with my professional career, as Andrew mentioned, I also provide content and I teach courses at Simplilearn. So that definitely gave me a lot of insights and exposure to different industries and how machine learning could be a great solution for a lot of applications across these industries. Before we begin with the content, Eddie, I don't know if you had the chance to launch the polls. Maybe we can just get a pulse check for our attendees here. So I'm going to wait maybe for about a minute. You can submit your answer here just to gauge the background and your expertise in AI and machine learning embedding. Perfect. All right, so just to read the stats quickly, we've got 50% they're interested exploring AI tools, and we've got another big portion, 45% using generative AI for everyday tasks. And think of this as just including the tools that are accessible to us, things like ChatGPT and other interesting tools that will really make us more productive. And then we got a low percentage of individuals that are building traditional machine learning models or deploying Gen AI systems at scale. So appreciate the responses. This definitely will help me provide proper examples and use cases for depending on your background. All right, let's go ahead and talk about our agenda for today. So first of all, we're going to talk about just some statistics about AI trends. And then we're going to talk about why Gen AI now. I think it goes without saying why we want to get involved in Gen AI, but it's nice to just get the industry perspective, why it is important. Then building Gen AI fluency, so methods of doing that. Ethical and responsible AI, that always comes as a component when we explore a new industry or new trend. Operating at scale, change management and culture, machine learning and Gen AI use cases, workforce upskilling spectrum, and the human touch, which is always nice to have just so we can figure out how we fit into this whole scheme. And then, as Eddie mentioned, we'll dedicate a portion to talk about, discuss any of your questions. All right, so let's start off with some of the interesting statistics, and these fresh out of some of the blogs that we gathered. So $2.5 trillion, that is projected economic growth. So generative AI is projected in general, and I would even bring in machine learning. That's going to be another component that would add more opportunity. But the gist of this is to give you a range of how massive the industry is going to grow. So $2.6 trillion to 4.4, and that is going to be the economic value across different industries globally in multiple sectors. Positioned for AI, and the productivity growth is very promising, and it's set to quadruple, and it's been quadrupling since 2022. The next piece of statistic here is that 2 out of 5 companies are already using AI. And I'll get to it in a second. I like to break things down. Sometimes AI is a very broad definition or broad term. What I like to do is I like to break things down into components like machine learning or generative AI. But we'll get to that in a second. What I'm trying to say here is that 2 out of 5 companies worldwide are already using AI, and including, specifically speaking, India is leading in terms of the adoption at approximately 59%, where it is using AI to reduce manual or repetitive tasks. And that is one big reason for this exponential growth. And then the last piece of statistic here is very relevant. 7 million UK workers are already using generative AI tools, whether it's for productivity or for content creation. That's a big portion. And 14% of the population aged from 16 to 75 have used generative AI at work, which makes a 66% increase from the previous year. So you can see here the growth is exponential and very noticeable across the board. All right, so why generative AI now? I think a lot of you, especially the ones that are using these generative AI tools, are already seeing the benefit of using generative AI, and the productivity is growing as well. So first of all, accessibility, right? That's what makes it easy for us to use, is that AI is now embedded in a lot of tools. Especially for things that are relevant to existing systems. So Windows already embedding AI. You've got tools like Excel right now has generative AI component. So this is a huge benefit for employees, freelancers, and independent creators that leverage these tools to create content. And then the market forces is very important. So for every business, in order to stay competitive, you need to have that edge of technology and staying relevant by embedding AI systems or solutions. So AI first strategies now is becoming a broad term in the ecosystem of the business and the planning. I got another piece of statistic here. 70% of companies are experimenting with generative AI, but less than 15% have scaled training. So this is important to note here because yes, generative AI is becoming very popular day by day, and it's becoming accessible, but there is still a big portion of companies that haven't adopted and scaled AI or generative AI properly. So what we want to do here is we want to focus on how we can translate this hype into reality. Well, the first step is making sure that your company has generative AI fluency. So building AI fluency is a component that you need to embed on multiple levels of the hierarchy. So you start off from the top, executive level. This is where the executives need to make sure that we have strategic decision-making with generative AI insights. So the executives need to leverage these tools, right? And along with that, I would add is that executives need to also be leaders of this change management. So they need to make sure that everyone is on board in order to, back to the point that I mentioned earlier, in order to stay relevant and stay competitive in the market. And then with executives, you've got the managers that come a long way, and they have to play a key role because they are helping with the workflow redesign and the AI governance. And then we go all the way to the frontline staff. That this is very important because it's up to them to adopt these tools, to stay up to date with the new trends. So they are responsible for the daily augmentation with AI co-pilots and other tools. So you have a broad spectrum of skills. You need to make sure these frontline individuals or workers, they are capable of doing so. So you've got prompting, evaluation, integration, and iteration. And this is focused on generative AI, but we're going to talk eventually about embedding machine learning as well. So think about this, expanding these skills even further. So in almost every webinar, I like to bring up this diagram. This is very important to understand because there's some misconceptions sometimes, and sometimes I see people using the wrong terminology when they label certain things. So it's always nice to level set and talk about all these components together and know the difference. So we start off, if you can see that, let me explain the object here. This is a Venn diagram where you have the outer shell or the big umbrella that talks about what we call AI or artificial intelligence. And always think about AI as that anything that mimics human intelligence. that can produce the same task and has logic. So this could be a blend of machine learning and some rule-based programming. So if you guys think about when you try to set a rule and write a script or a program that is hard-coded, so to speak, that's a piece of terminology here. And what we're trying to say is that someone programmed the steps for what the machine needs to use and follow. That is the non-machine learning artificial intelligence. So it is still mimicking our human-based tasks, but it is using logic that was produced by a human, okay? That is the greatest distinction between artificial intelligence and specific subfield that is machine learning. And that's why you see machine learning is considered a subset of artificial intelligence, but has a unique attribute because the human interference or the human management of it is a lot more minimal. You're asking the machine to learn from data, to learn from patterns, explore solutions, and give you that solution. Okay, so you're basically not influencing the machine, you're letting it learn and train from the data and then giving you a solution. Now, after machine learning, there's a subset that is more advanced. It's called deep learning. And without diving too much into the details of it, think about deep learning as a new solution that evolved over time. Machine learning, when I say machine learning, it doesn't mean that deep learning, it's not part of deep learning. When I say deep learning, sorry, let me rephrase that. When I say deep learning, that doesn't imply that it's not machine learning. It is still considered machine learning, but just an advanced solution. And it's inspired by the human neural cells. So what we call artificial neural networks. And it leverages artificial neural networks to solve for complex problems. And then now we ask the question, well, where does generative AI sit in this whole ecosystem? And that's why you see a bubble that sits inside all these shells. So if I want to define generative AI, I would say it's a subcomponent of deep learning, which in turns subcomponent of machine learning, which is also a subcomponent of artificial intelligence. So now you know the difference if you weren't familiar with what I'm talking about here. And happy to answer any questions eventually when we get to Q&A. But think of generative AI as leveraging everything we learned about in deep learning and machine learning to solve for complex questions or queries that involve different forms of media and generate media for you, such as text, images, video, etc. So let's talk about ethical and responsible AI. Now, it's nice to start with this, but eventually, when I talk about the other components about adoption and AI adoption, I think it's going to become more relevant over time. So think about breaking this into 4 main components. Okay, so you have bias, transparency, data security, and human in the loop. Okay, these are 4 important pillars in my opinion, because what you want to do is you want to ensure that your business is embedding this AI solution successfully and minimizing any risk. That could be regulatory risk, reputational risk, could be any factor. So let's start with some examples, okay? So for example, you've got bias here. We've seen hiring tools, things like a recruitment system, rejecting some qualified candidates where simply they may have specific gender, okay? So this actually a true story happened to Amazon at some point. They realized that their AI system or machine learning system was being selective and favoring males over female resumes. So Amazon actually ended up scrapping that internal AI recruiting system because it realized that there's a bias. So you want to avoid or prevent these systems from producing unfair outcomes due to this skewed training data, or it could be a lot of different factors that cause this type of problem. Also, transparency is very important, especially in healthcare right now. It's becoming a big situation. So you want to ensure that AI decisions and processes are understood and explained, Okay, so also this is important in finance. I can think about a lot of examples. So in finance, if a lot of mortgage companies, they use AI or machine learning to come up with a decision whether to reject or accept the application for a mortgage or a loan. And when you reject that mortgage, you need to have an explanation why there was a rejection. Sometimes some machine learning models, we call them black box, they're closed off models and they don't explain why they came up with such decision. So your job is to ensure that there's transparency in that model, or the factors that contributed to that decision are understood. So that's very, very important, because you will get asked, and you may get a situation where a customer might sue you, for example, for saying like, hey, there was discrimination. How come you rejected my application? Data security is also important. I think all of us understand, we've heard in the past about a few data breaches, especially in healthcare. This is where hackers, sometimes they are looking for healthcare data, sensitive information, such as, age, disease, or any diagnoses. So you've seen a lot of healthcare companies nowadays spending billions of dollars on the data infrastructure to ensure that there's security. So you need to protect the sensitive data that is used and generated by AI, especially if this is a system that talks to multiple departments or components. And then the last piece is very important, is including human in the loop. And I feel like that fourth component will tie all these three pieces together. The reason why, because keeping the human in the loop will help ensure that we do not have bias, will help ensure that we are providing enough transparency, and we have enough data security. Okay, so think about, let's say, AI in, let's say we're trying, and I'm trying to think of an example in terms of building tutorials or training for current employees. So you want to build these training tutorials or modules that are specific to the employee needs, and they're tailored to different departments and different expertise or levels of experience. So in that aspect, you need to include the human in the loop, because they can add that human touch and confirm certain information that was derived from that model. So just to summarize this, and this is basically telling you about the risk of not paying attention to these, is that you may have ethics misstep. And this could cause some consequences of harming the reputation of the company, or even financial damages that could be caused by either fines from the government, not following specific regulation, or there's a data leak, or when your reputation is harmed in the industry, then you're not going to have customers. You're going to start losing customers. All right, let's talk about operationalizing at scale. So this is important, because this is where the rubber meets the road. How can I perform, let's say, a plan or an outline? How can I perform an outline that would give me a successful embedding of an AI solution? And when we say AI, again, it doesn't mean just generative AI. It could be a machine learning solution, deep learning solution, or again, generative AI solution. So I broke this into multiple stages. So first stage is making sure that you have a clear strategy, right? You're not just exploring or playing around with things, right? You have a clear strategy, and you have a clear guidance for governance. Okay, so you need to define the business objective that is going to be responsible to maintain these AI policies and the compliance guardrails. Some examples here, I broke it down between machine learning and generative AI based on the what is needed for your company. So for machine learning, you can pinpoint predictive opportunities, like having forecasting for your sales, for example, or risk detection for upcoming gap in supply chain. So you need to have a clear direction to the objectives of your system. whether it's a large system that is comprehensive or something that is specific to the business need. And then for generative AI, you want to identify high value co-pilot or content generation use cases, okay? Stage number 2 is the data foundation. So this is always important, and I express this in every webinar, I express this in every class I teach to students that are interested in AI and machine learning, is that the success of these systems relies very heavily on the clarity of the data and the focus of the data, okay? So you need to have scalable, secure, and quality data environment. So that is going to be important. And yes, it may be costly for some companies if they are large and they have multiple departments. That would require some funding to organize and clean the data and make sure that there's no messy data. So we call that unclean data. So you need to minimize the data cleansing stage and try to address that as early as possible. So good examples here is that some machine learning engineers will collaborate with what we call data engineers, where they can extract what we call features. Think about features. This is a piece of terminology in the world of machine learning. Think about features as the ingredients you need for your machine learning model to be trained on. So the machine learning model is going to train and learn from the data based on what you give it, these ingredients called features, okay? And you want to make sure at this stage to handle bias and ensure that you have data that represents your population, okay? So your data is a good representative of the population. And then for generative AI, you want to curate a corpora. For RAG, that's an advanced generative AI system. And then have the ability for fine-tuning and prompt engineering. So think of this as that, let's say I'm trying to enable a generative AI system for a chatbot, okay? I can import that system right off the box. I can get it from, let's say, a company like Google Gemini, and I can embed that successfully in my company. But that system is going to give me very general answers. It would be more beneficial to my company if I fine-tune that model and make it more specific to the questions or the queries that I expect my customers to ask. Okay, so let's say I'm using, Amazon as a rough example. You expect a chatbot that has this generative AI mechanism. You expect a chatbot to be trained and fine-tuned on questions that are relevant to the products that Amazon offers, right? So something that is specific to Amazon products and Amazon customer service. And that's why this step is very important. And then stage number 3 is model development and validation. So this is where you start taking the steps with training and fine-tuning and selecting the appropriate models in your machine learning and generative AI. So take, for example, in machine learning, there are multiple measures to get a sense of the success of these machine learning systems. So things like the AUC curve or the F1 score or the accuracy score. So you want to have some quantitative evaluation. And this would be very useful over the life cycle of your model, because you want to, before you publish your model and deploy it, and let's say, when I say model, by the way, it's a solution. Just think of it as a word for solution. Before you publish your solution, you want to make sure that it performed well, obviously. But then when you want to take this to next evolution, you want to improve it, you want to have a baseline to compare it to. So let's say first iteration or first version of my solution had 80% accuracy. Then the next version is expected to have a lot higher accuracy. And that's why these quantitative evaluation measures are important, okay? Stage number 4 is deployment and adoption. So when you deploy, you want to make sure that your AI systems are working seamlessly across these different departments it needs to touch and work with. And with that, you have different technologies involved. You have APIs, which is a platform that can communicate between different platforms. And think of this as like a way of streaming data across these applications. And then you have systems that are, let's say, web-based systems that capture information from your end user, and then you want to grab that information and send it to your database so you can store it and process it for future improvement opportunities. So all that to say is that you want to make sure that your AI solution is deployed properly and collecting information that is needed to improve and fine-tune your model over time, and also measuring success. And that takes me to stage number 5, the monitoring and continuous improvement. So when you have these systems in place, you can easily track ROI, you can easily track the performance drift. And let me explain this a little bit. For performance drift is a very important concept here. When you deploy the machine learning solution, there is going to be a change in your population, okay? Whether a new, let's talk about building a solution for market segmentation, okay? So you relied on the machine learning model to give you market segmentation and divide up your population to different marketing campaigns. So over time, there is a chance your population is going to change, because us humans, we change our habits, trends change, etc. So that is a situation where we have performance drift. Our model is no longer going to perform as it used to, and therefore you need to retrain your model on the new elements of your data, and therefore you have a newly developed solution that is tailored for that new trend and new behavior. So that's why monitoring and continuous improvement is a very important piece that ties in all these components that I just mentioned, or stages, together. All right. With that being said, let's take a step back and talk about the change management and the culture. That is very important, because you need to make sure that your end users plus your employees are aware and they are capable of such change, or they are prepared for such change. So first of all is the learning ecosystem. You need to provide on-demand learning with micro modules. That way you break it down into components, and then you can track the progress of that learning journey. And you can also provide AI-powered learning platforms that would basically leverages your existing systems and learning modules, and then add that AI touch to it so you can have more interactivity. We'll talk about some examples eventually, okay? Governance structures. This is very important. This is something that I always discuss when I provide consultation for some companies that want to adopt AI technology, is that we have, it's always recommended to have what we call the Data Science Center of Excellence. Okay, this is a department that is tying all the departments together, all the departments that are involved in machine learning and AI. This department, the Data Science Center of Excellence, is responsible of making sure that there's no bias, there's security that is embedded properly. So all the concerns that we talked about right here in the ethical and responsible AI deployment. So the Data Science Center of Excellence is going to embed these regulations, accountability, restrictions, and think of it as a human oversight to have visibility for these priorities. And then in terms of the change management, you need to make sure that your leadership and your teams are aligned properly, okay? So you need to make sure that the executives that are championing the embedding of AI initiatives are at the forefront, and they are connected to all the other departments so they can continue with inspiring and motivating other departments and making sure that the adoption is going very well. So Another component is clear communication. Make sure that the objective of AI is clear to everyone in the company and explaining why we are doing such adoption, why are we considering certain tools. And then there could be a situation of resistance management where you have to address any fears or job losses from employees. So you need to be very transparent and provide support to employees and ensure them that this is going to be a change in terms of evolving the skill set of your employees, not replacing them. So it's not just embedding tech. We can wrap it up with saying it's a cultural shift. All right, I'm checking time. So let me glance over some of these use cases just so we can address that and allow Andrew to have time to talk about his portion. So let's discuss some use cases in HR. So you have AI-assisted job descriptions. You have resume scanning. So a lot of tools that a lot of you probably familiar with that help streamline the process of recruiting and streamline the process of publishing job postings. You also have chatbots that can help with HR queries. So let's say for internal employees, they have some Q&A questions or FAQ, frequently asked questions, and HR chatbots can basically respond and use those to provide more color or add more detail. So chatbots can help. I've seen a lot of companies embed those, and they are very successful. You also you can use machine learning, specifically non-generative AI solutions, where you can build a system that help you with predicting attrition modeling and identify at-risk employees. So try to get a sense of what employees are expected to leave the company, who's going to stay on. That helps with retention. Not necessarily think of it in the positive term, is that I know some employee that is considering leaving, or there's a chance that they're going to leave. What can I do to retain them? Okay. Let's talk about use cases in learning and development. And we have, for example, personalized learning paths that are tuned to learning progress. So I can provide a machine learning system or even generative AI system with information or insights about my employees, their level of expertise, their background, and then let the machine decide how can we tailor specific learning paths for these different backgrounds and objectives for every department. Okay. You've got also course materials generation for quizzes, summaries, case studies. That would be also important. And then focusing specifically on machine learning solution, we've got workforce capability forecasting, so we can understand our skill gap. There is another use case here. This is similar in project management. I will go over this real quick. Think about an AI-powered project tracking that can auto-generate project status. It can scan through logs in my system. Let's say we have a pipeline to transform data from one system to another, and then this AI-powered system will capture the information and organize it for me, so I can have more of a risk log and a summary that will help me understand what's going on. So I've got 1 minute left before I pivot, so I'm going to wrap it up here with workforce upskilling spectrum. So this is important because this will help you understand what type of roles that are they're basically participating in this cultural shift of AI and machine learning adoption. So we've got the segment of builders. These are going to be machine learning engineers that are designing machine learning solutions. Data scientists, these are the researchers that are trying to explore new innovative solutions. And then we have the integrators. These would be the business analysts, the project managers, the product owners. And then we have the amplifiers. Think of these as the frontline employees that are leveraging these systems, knowledge workers that are helping with training, and some of the customer service reps that are helping with that feedback loop if the system is used in customer let's call this like a client-facing solution. So I'll pause here, and then we'll actually, before I turn it over to Andrew, I'm going to remind the group or the audience that we're going to have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, we can wait for that. Andrew, we'll give it back to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, thanks, Bassel. That was really informative. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. At this stage, it's just to say, don't worry, folks. We appreciate this isn't a sales presentation, so it's not that we're going to try and sell you lots of courses at this stage. But obviously, it would be amiss of us not to give you some detail on the range of Simplilearn training solutions that are available to you, and also give you some extra background on the relationship between Simplilearn and ILX. I'm conscious of the fact that many of you will be here because you've worked with ILX before, but you might have, you know, you might not even have heard of Simplilearn if your only interaction is with ILX. So thinking about why the partnership is so strong, I think it's largely because both organisations have a very keen focus on two things, which is quality and flexibility in delivery. As I say, I know a lot of you might not be aware of Simplilearn, so just to give you a few fast facts so that you're familiar with them. These guys aren't new. You know, Simplilearn have been around since 2010 and have been delivering world-class sort of text-based training solutions for 15 years. ILX have partnered with them as our preferred text-based provider for 7 years. The only reason that relationship continues that long is because the feedback we get working with Simplilearn is absolutely fantastic. I work with them myself on a couple of my major accounts, and you know, to work with them is an absolute joy. Their majority shareholder is Blackstone. Why is that important? Well, those of you who know, Blackstone is the world's largest asset management organization. They're not going to just work with anybody. They're only going to back winners. They've been the majority shareholder since 2021, I believe, and that allows them to invest in a real quality product and get trainers like Bassel. You know, people who aren't just book learn, but to get the best in breed to help deliver their solutions. Content is developed alongside vendors. So if you're taking an IBM course, that course will have been developed with input from people like IBM themselves. What I find really interesting working with Simplilearn is they have a lot of their programs accredited by top universities. Now, I work with universities, and so I can tell you there are universities and there are universities. It's interesting to see that the two universities that accredit Simplilearn content within the UK are Cambridge and Imperial College. And for those of you who don't know, if you look at the league tables of who are the best universities in the UK, Imperial and Cambridge are up there, and it will definitely give you some confidence that if those guys are giving the accreditations to Simplilearn, it really is, as I say, best of breed. So all that means that Simplilearn, you know, they've trained 8 million students, which I just was blown away by. They work with 100 companies from the Fortune 500, and they are major training partners of people like Airbus, Dell, Bosch, and I know through myself they work extensively with Vodafone. And what that means from a trainer experience, from a learner experience, is you know, I think 90% of people who complete a Simplilearn course have met all their major objectives at the end of that course. 80% of people who embark on a longer program graduate. And anybody that works with distance learning or blended learning solutions knows that that statistic is absolutely excellent. Bassel, if you could move me on a slide, that would be appreciated. There, fantastic. I did mention flexibility before. Those of you that work with ILX will know that we deliver solutions mainly through e-learning, through blended programs, and through instructor-led. And it's no surprise that when you look at the Simplilearn solutions, that they follow a very similar pattern. So with e-learning, these are typically short courses, mainly single subject, and they just to stress that these can be bought at an individual level, but obviously we do a lot of corporate solutions. So reach out to your account manager, who will be happy to tell you all about how you can use Simplilearn e-learning. There's blended solutions, again, mirrors what we do at ILX. Typically, these will be a longer program. So you may put together a series of e-learning courses, but that will be supported by a range of instructor-led training events delivered by subject matter experts such as Bassel. You can buy those individually, and if you do, the instructor-led training support events will be on a public schedule. They'll be delivered virtually. But if you're looking for wider corporate groups, then the e-learning can be supported with dedicated workshops. So where the public schedule is very much lecture style, the dedicated workshops that we provide with groups would be more workshop style, albeit delivered remotely. And with the instructor-led solution, again, mirrors ILX in many ways, in that the course can just be standard content, but it can be tailored, it can be certification focused, or it can be content focused. If you could move me along, please, Bassel. So what's available? Well, as e-learning content, these are some of the more popular GenAI courses. I stress at this stage that these are just the most popular ones. This list is by no means exhaustive. The e-learning courses are typically relatively short, but I want to stress that, and again, they, like ILX, they include tests, they include completion certificates, and where appropriate, they will also include practical application exercises available as single purchases, or contact your account manager for a range of corporate solutions. If you could move me again, please, Bassel. So with the programs, we're moving away from single courses, and what typically these will do, they will incorporate a range of related e-learning content supported with public live virtual courses, or as I said, if you're looking for groups, the live virtual interactions can be more workshop based. And you can see on the slide the most popular titles, but again, I stress that is just a sample. There are literally hundreds of these programs. Just to give you an example, yesterday I received an email from someone looking for a blockchain program. And where would I go? Simplilearn. Within 24 hours, I've got a full solution which includes 50 hours of e-learning, 70 hours of instructor-led training, just on blockchain. So as I say, please don't take that list, those courses on there are all that they do, and contact your account manager for more details. And finally, just move it along, please, Bassel. Instructor-led courses. So often these are delivered to groups within an organization. Talking about GenAI, you know, these courses can be technology-based, so things like prompts and Python. Bassel alluded earlier on to behavioural courses, so it might be things like critical thinking with AI. I know that he mentioned change management before, ethics of AI, all that kind of content is available. And also there are role-based courses. So we're having things like AI in sales and marketing, AI in software engineering, AI in customer service. What I would stress is that working with Simplilearn allows you to almost rip up the traditional delivery model. So when you work with a lot of providers, a 40-hour course would typically be delivered Monday through Friday. You do a full 40 hours in a week. You leave the course slightly frazzled, but with Simplilearn, you have a much better option. Courses can be delivered that way, but more typically, that 5-day course might be spread out over a 2 or 3 week period and delivered in 4-hour blocks. And that obviously means that your learning curve is much shallower, you retain more knowledge, but it also means that it's a lot easier to schedule. And I think that that's something that really is fairly unique within the UK marketplace of working with an organisation such as Simplilearn. So I know that's a lot of information to take in, but hopefully it will give you some understanding of the nature of the relationship, why the two organisations work so well together. If you've enjoyed your training experience at ILX, it will be very similar when you engage with Simplilearn. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Open up for Q&A.
Yeah, so as Andrew just mentioned, we're going to move on to the Q&A portion now. We have had a couple of questions through, which I'll start with, but if you do have any questions, please do just pop those in the question box and we will try to get through as many of them as we possibly can. So the first question was regarding the use case. I think you mentioned, Bassel, about the CV resume screening. In terms of avoiding that bias that you mentioned with the Amazon case study, like how do people go about doing that? Are there any particular tips you've got for how they can avoid that bias?
Yeah, absolutely. So machine learning in general, there are multiple models that can provide what we call model explainability. And these technologies or tools will help you understand how a specific model arrived to a decision. And if you notice that it used, let's say, for example, gender as a factor or race, then that's a scenario where there's some bias. And another piece of this is that when you build that model, you want to make sure that you're not including these elements as part of your data parameters. A lot of actually states in the United States or even countries in Europe, they even ban doing that. And to combat that, like I said, you can avoid including that data element. But on top of that, what's interesting is that even though that you do not include these data elements for gender, race, or the sensitive information, the model can still sometimes find some ways to build bias. So there are some intelligent systems, advanced systems that you can put on top of your model that give you that final scan to have more assurance that your model is not being biased towards a subgroup of your population. And then I would wrap it up with another thing is that your collection of data is very important as well. Make sure you have a healthy distribution that represents all the subsegments of your customer base and population.
Right. The next question says, thank you for the valuable insights. That was very interesting and helpful. Would it be possible to share a practical example of how your solutions can support the finance function, particularly in the context of dashboard design?
Yeah, dashboard design is very important. I'm not sure if they asked for something I can address quickly now or like a reference, but I'll address that in a few words. I think the most important thing is when we are designing and building reports or dashboards, I think just the human nature tends to, we design something for ourselves. Yes, it's an art form, and sometimes we have to express what we think makes sense, but always try to bring in the customer in the picture, the end user of your dashboard. Sometimes we may think that we have a full understanding of their use case and what they're looking for, but that's not true sometimes. And you have to gather information, stay in touch with your end user, make them aware of your progress, what components you're considering in your dashboard. I think that is one of the best recommendations. Other than that, in terms of making things look better and cleaner and suitable, I think that is more part of making sure that your design is clean and modern and follows the latest trends of what to consider for filters, chart types, other insightful objects.
Great, thank you. Andrew, I think this next one's probably potentially a bit more for you. It just says, how are these Simply Learn courses assessed? I think there are tests throughout, is that correct? Oh, you're on mute before you go to answer.
Like before, it can vary. So within an e-learning course, usually it's an exam, a short exam, can be multiple choice at the end of the learning course. However, there are sometimes practical assessments. Within the wider learning programs, it can be very varied. So there will be multiple tests, but there can also be capstone projects. And there can also be simulations that you complete within the wider program. So it's wide and varied, and it would depend on the content that you're sitting. But most touch points are covered.
Okay, perfect. Well, I think that's all the questions we've had through. So unless we'll give it a couple of minutes just in case anyone's got any others that they're just sort of still typing out. But yeah, thank you both so much. That was such a very insightful session. I hope everyone's enjoyed it as much as I have. I know I've definitely found it useful. As mentioned, we will be sending over an email tomorrow with a link to the recording, so you'll be able to watch it back, share it with colleagues, that kind of thing. If you want to find out more information about Simply Learn, about the partnership with ILX and any of the courses that Andrew spoke about, as you mentioned, please do get in touch with your relationship manager, or you can find out a lot more on the website as well. So that's www.ilxgroup.com. So you can, check out over there. Thank you so much for joining. We haven't had any more questions, so I think we are done for today. Thank you both. Again, great session. And I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Yeah.